to meet is an award-winning voice actor, and he plays a crucial role on the world's most popular, story-driven, world-building, multimedia brand, Critical Role. Please welcome up on stage, Mr. Matthew Mercer!
Hello, everyone.
So some people might know who you are. Thank you. I was telling Matt backstage that before this, this is the first year ever I've seen more Jester cosplayers at Comic-Con than I've seen Spider-Man. And we once held the world record for most Spider-Man in a convention.
Which makes me wonder when we have the world record for most jesters at a convention, right?
Next year
that's the next step, right?
Next year when you come back, right, Matt?
See, there we go. Perfect.
Guys, so we only have 30 minutes, and I know we're all excited, but if this is going to continue, we're not going to get to the questions, because I really want to ask, so Sweden loves you. How do you like Sweden?
Sweden's awesome. You guys are great. This has been absolutely wonderful. The reception's been beautiful. Everyone's been so sweet. I love the city. It's beautiful. This is my weather. I'm a cloud rainy. Like, give me gray skies all day, and I'm so happy. And I showed up. Everyone's like, the weather is beautiful here. I'm like, yeah, I can see the sun though. And so this has been a nice turn for me. But no, it's been wonderful. Thank you guys for having me.
It's been great having you here, and thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy year.
Oh, my pleasure, really. This has been great.
Yeah. So you took your home game that you've been playing with your friends for how long?
This group in particular, we'd now be going on 7 years playing together, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you turned that into a Twitch live show. And then you turned that into a campaign setting, and you turned that into a comic book, and now it's also an animated show, or an animated show is coming.
Yeah.
How does that journey feel?
When you put it in that context, it's nuts. I mean, it's nuts in any context. It feels crazy. It feels crazy. I don't know how this happened. I still don't know. I feel so very thankful and I mean, that's you guys, you know, that we didn't think it would have any impact, let alone the scope that it has and continues to have. And all these wonderful things that we get to do with this world and this story and the channel is because of you guys. You know, we pitched around an animated series based on this beforehand, and every studio was like, we don't get it. And so we're like, well, do you guys want it? And then the internet was like, yeah, we do. And all of a sudden, everybody was like, oh, hey, can we have that meeting again? And I was like, so this is all thanks to you guys. You guys have make all this possible at all, and I'm just very thankful.
And I think a lot of people are very thankful to you as well for running this thing. I also think you led into one of my other questions is why do you think, and this is probably a hard question for you to answer, but why do you think so many people connect so deeply to Critical Role?
I mean, it's different from person to person, I imagine. And I've tried to figure it out myself to a certain degree. I like to think that a lot of it stems from the fact that, you know, the initial grab is that, you know, we're voice actors, so we tend to live in that space of imagination and, you know, playing to the hilt a character without any sort of sense of, I don't know, esteem, a sense of worry or embarrassment, because we have no shame. But then at the base of it, and this is the core of everything we do, is at the base of it, it's still just friends enjoying being together and playing together. That Thursday night is sacred for all of us, no matter what's going on in our life, no matter how stressful or intense everything is, we all still get to come together on Thursday night and let it all go and just be us having a good time at the table. And I think that type of genuine connection and non-manufactured experience is so rare in a lot of media out there. And through that, we're able to hopefully promote the idea that that's a very important thing for you to find in your life as well, and through this community. And I think that's really why it's found the audience that it has, is so much of this world of entertainment is constructing the idea of what people should enjoy, as opposed to allowing a moment of genuine human connection and just good people having a good time.
That is an unapplaudable answer, I feel.
Well, no, I don't.
So yeah, I think it's a lot of the genuine love that you put into this and the rest of your crew put into this, and that also goes through in the other things that you do with Critical Role. You're making the comic book now. The second version of the Max Machina Origins is out.
Yeah.
And you co-wrote that. So how was it, like, because this is your friends playing a bunch of characters in a home game. We don't know what happened in the original early days of Vox Machina, but now we do because it's in the comics. So what was it like returning to that, and also writing these characters and actually trying to fit them on a page rather than just have Liam do his thing for like an hour and a half?
Right, yeah. It was a unique challenge. One, because I had to go back through all my old campaign notes, which thankfully I still had on my hard drive. But then I'm like, okay, cool, let me look back and see all the things I prepared. And, you know, they're madman scrawlings. They weren't written to be consumed or broken down into an actual digestible narrative. They were just ideas thrown at my Word document to be reminders for me in the middle of a session that I ran 3+, 4+, almost 6 years ago. You know, it was almost 7 years ago now. And so a lot of it was me having to go through again and define and write out all of these things that had happened, and then recalling moments, and then talking to the other players and being like, remember when this thing happened in the game? Was this the way it played out? And they'd be like, yeah, no, this is how it went. So it was all of us kind of all collectively reminiscing about what certain elements of the story were, and then condensing that too, because you have to kind of pick, for this type of story, all the relevant and interesting story elements, and be okay with letting go the things that weren't as interesting. You know, like a couple of small encounters that weren't important to the narrative, that wouldn't be great to be in the middle of this really good story of, trying to save Grog, and all of a sudden 4 pages you blow because they ran into a mimic that has nothing to do with anything. So yeah, it's like taking the things that aren't necessary, trimming the fat, and leaving what is a really, good, consistent story.
And you're gonna have to do this again now for the animated show.
Yeah, literally was doing it up until I left for this convention.
How is it going? We all want to know.
Actually, it's going really great. I was like, I'm not being facetious when I say this. That was a big point of nervousness for me, was going into this and wondering how much would have to be cut for to fit the entire story into the time we have allotted and the amount of animation that we could afford. And I was kind of like, oh God, how bad are we going to butcher this to make it fit? Like you see whenever there's an adaptation from a long-form narrative into a short-form narrative, there's a lot has to be changed. So I was super scared. Honestly, it turned out really good. And things will be changed, things will be cut, things will be truncated and changed around a little bit, but they're all very minor and don't affect the overall story. And all the major points and the major characters and the moments are there, and some things got kind of rearranged to make more sense outside of a D&D game. Some battles that were very climactic and probably weren't supposed to be were kind of lessened maybe a bit. Some certain battles that maybe weren't as climactic as I wanted them to be are now much cooler in animation, hopefully. So yeah, it was a whole unique process with a really talented room of writers that are all I looked up to tremendously. It's a really good team of writers in this, guys. You're gonna be excited when we can talk about it. But to have all these people that have done incredible work to look at me and be like, here's our ideas for the Briarwood thing here and in Whitestone. Does that work, Matt? And have them all look to me as like the lore master and going, actually, no, we can't change that because it affects this, and then down the road in season 4, whenever that happens, it's important for this story. And they're like, okay, all right, cool. But maybe we don't change it. I'm like, was that easy? So yeah, it's pretty trippy.
Oh, nice. Was there any character that was harder to write as canon?
I mean, right now the scripts aren't done yet for the series. For the comic, you mean though?
We can do both.
There we go. Yeah, we don't have scripts for the animated series. Yeah, those are being done soon. We just finished breaking down the entire narrative arc and like the episodes. So that happens first, and then now all the writers get to run with it. For the comic, Scanlan, he kind of writes himself for the most part, and and Jody Hauser, who is our writer for the current comic, she does the majority of the actual narrative dialogue, writing for each of the characters. She's watched so much of the show. She was a fan of Vox Machina years ago before we even became friends, and it turns out that she's also was an amazing comic book writer, and we needed a writer for the Vox Machina comic, and we're like, Jody, would you? She's like, yeah. So she does such a wonderful job of bringing all the characters to life because she knows them as well as we do. My part of co-writing is more of the meta-narrative.
Oh,
so
right, yeah.
because they're game sessions that I ran, so I'm the one who beats out the whole story and what happens moment to moment and where they go and what happens with here and how these interactions work out, and then give it to Jody, and then Jody actually fleshes out and brings it to life. So I can't take credit for any of the actual amazing, snappy dialogue and really great characterizations in these scenes, because it's really her breathing life into them based on, her understanding of the show, and honestly doing a far better job than I ever could have doing it. So
they're amazingly well written. So it's very good comic books too.
Yeah, I'm so glad.
Yeah. So another thing, so let's jump into the current, more critical role, the actual game. Because a question that I really wanted to ask you, because you said you had a couple of answers for it, is there was a couple of, what's the worst curveball you got so far from either the Mighty Nine or Vox Machina or both? Because we all know that player groups ruins your plans all the time. It's like what they're there for.
Yeah. Biggest curveball from the Mighty Nine would have been when they went to the Menagerie Coast and then attacked a ship and then stole it.
Oh.
And then became pirates suddenly. That was not expected at all. And not even you can't expect what your player is going to do, but I was like, I have a few ideas of what might happen, and I had a number of things they were fleshed out just in case, and then they just went like, all right, cool, no, we're going this way.
I thought when that happened, I'm like, did he plan for that possibility?
No. I was like, surely they're not just going to brazenly attack a ship in the middle of the harbor of the city they just came to in the middle of the night that is swarming with guards.
No, that would be stupid.
That would be a really dumb thing to do. And then steal the ship, and then no, why would you? Okay, well, learn. In the words of the late great Victor, who there sits in the middle of the room, learn from my mistakes. As far as Vox Machina go, there are a number of curveballs I throw. The one that I remember distinctly, getting a cold sweat in the back of my body, was partway later in the campaign when they were going through the vestiges. I didn't expect them to go to the city of Brass as early as they did.
Oof, yeah.
And for some reason, it becomes a problem when your players can teleport anywhere and plane shift in the game, is how do you prepare for anything and everywhere at any time? It's a certain level of campaign where most DMs should be and we're done.
But you can't do that because you have a commitment
I know.
of 3 hours, so.
Yep. So they're like, cool, we're going to the city of Brass. Let's go to the Plane of Fire. And I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. I probably should have prepared that to some degree. Okay, well, let's see where this goes. And I don't know if you ever watch those episodes again, for them, Senecure and the whole initial arrival to the city was completely improvised, with me sweating and going I don't. I very much was not ready for that, but it turned out okay.
I guess this is Brian, and he is the tavern keep.
Yeah.
And this is his wife, also Brian.
Yep. A lot of Brians and Steves. Steve shows up everywhere.
Steve is a good, strong fantasy name.
Yeah. I think there was actually, what was it? There was one NPC name that I kept unintentionally going to in the first campaign. Jameson. Thank you. Yeah, you know it. Yeah. There were a few Jamesons that started showing up in the campaign, which is fine because different cultures and different worlds, I know a lot of Matts. I grew up with a lot of Matts. There can be a lot of Jamesons, but because that had happened, there were all of these community conspiracy theories of the cult of Jameson that is the long-term villain for the story, and I was like, that's actually pretty clever. I wish I had thought of that. Anyway, Jameson's weird.
This is also a fun thing for you. You run your campaign publicly, so you also have the Reddit. And normally for DMs, we will hear the players discuss, and they will have better ideas than we had when we started the campaign. You have an entire subreddit with like hundreds of thousands of followers that thinks that you're more clever than you probably are.
Oh, I guarantee you that's the case.
Have you ever, like, do you read that at all? Or do you try to keep away from it?
I can't. Partially, it's just the sheer volume of information on there. I don't have enough time. Two, for a person that has deep-seated insecurities, reading long threads that are, breaking down the various things that you did or didn't do correctly for your game cannot be the best for your self-esteem. So you have to take that in bite-sized pieces. Though constructive criticism is very, welcome. And I have learned some cool things from reading those threads. There's only a certain amount that I can take before I'm like, okay, this is not good for my mood today. And I don't know. I just don't have the time as much. But I can guarantee you, I have read threads and I've seen these great conspiracy theories sometimes that I'm like, oh man, that is so cool. I wish I had thought of that. But that's not what I thought up. And I'm not going to like change gears halfway and take that idea because I have my idea for a thread there. And I have reasons for the choices I made that may not pay off as quickly as maybe what their idea would have in some ways. But I hope it'll be okay in the long run.
It probably will. So thinking of time specifically, because now we got to time manage. So I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are very curious for your best tips and tricks on how to maybe improve the game, become a better DM, the stuff that you've learned after playing this game for so long.
Yes. I'm sure the people in this room have been playing longer than I have, so sorry. I'm not.
But we all learn different things.
That's
and
true.
we can all learn from each other, like regardless of if you've been playing for like 3 days or 30 years.
I've learned tremendous amounts from people that are like new DMs that I've played with, and even new players that come to the table. Like we all have so much to learn from each other, like you said, regardless of the experience you have with the game.
It's a sharing culture of the togetherness and storytelling and
love
community,
it.
and
It's
it's
great.
so sweet. So what have you learned, and tell us?
Well, if you haven't had the opportunity, I do have a series on YouTube called GM Tips that I did for a while, and then Satine Phoenix took over and did an even better job with. That is a lot of great tips and tricks for world building. There's also Matt Colville's wonderful YouTube channel that breaks down on wonderful trips on running the game and how to world build, and a number of other great YouTube channels. Me personally, to try and give you some concise ideas for running the game, communication is key. Both before you start playing and while you're playing, meaning before you even start running a game with players, having a session 0 conversation with everybody about what kind of game you want it to be so everyone can manage their expectations. Nothing's worse than having a bunch of players come to the table all with their own unique expectations of what kind of game they want it to be, and then having it not meet those expectations because nobody talked about it, or the GM didn't know to prepare the kind of game that people wanted to play. And then suddenly you're a few sessions in and nobody's really enjoying it because no one really knows how to gel together, or in some cases, some players might not mesh with the group too. I've had games with friends of mine that are good people and good friends, but once we started playing at the table, our play styles just didn't mesh, and that's okay. So having those early sessions and communicating expectations about the game, the play styles that you enjoy. Oh God, is everyone okay?
Somebody fainted because there were so many good tips.
I guess so. Sorry. And also communicating levels of comfort with certain narrative elements too. You want to make sure that the story doesn't ever go too far or go into a space that nobody at the table is comfortable with. So having those session zeros are very important. And another good tip is if you're having a problematic player, or in some cases a problematic GM, talk about it. It doesn't have to be in the middle of the session unless it's something that's actually halting the game, but do talk about it. Meet afterward and have a conversation about why there's something not gelling, why there's something in the story that's bothering you, you're not comfortable with, or an action of a player that's starting to really kind of affect your enjoyment, and it's working this out together. And it won't always work out, because sometimes it's just not a right fit, and either you have to leave that table and find another one, or that GM has to be a GM that GMs for another group because it's not your GM. You don't feel like you're shackled to an experience that maybe isn't the healthiest for you to be part of. And thankfully, as a person that grew up in an area or an atmosphere where finding other players, let alone other GMs, was such a rare experience, spotting a unicorn in the wild almost. Look at this community that we fostered now of gamers. There's so many more opportunities now to find local people and non-local people. We have the technology to play with people all over the world and find groups with them. So, don't feel locked into an experience or a social group that maybe isn't the most healthy place for you to enjoy and experience these role-playing games. And you'll be happy when you do find one that fits your style.
I was so taken aback by that. I'm also always waiting for the applause to kick in.
It's all good.
So yeah, I shouldn't have told you not to applaud. That's like my cue to be like, oh yeah, that was really smart. Oh shit, I need to think of another question. But you've been part of this community for a really long time, and I know that you were in a documentary recently that I watched because I'm a creeper. I'm actually a critter, but that's a different thing. And you said that you got into this a bit in the 90s, I think, and then during the 2000s we sort of saw game stores died off, the hobby kind of died off, and now it's back up again. What do you feel is the future now for TRPGs and these kind of collaborative narrative experiences?
Oh man, sky's the limit at this point. It just means the community just gets that much larger, and more people that for many years would, raise an eyebrow and give a hearty scoff whenever anyone discussed D&D in a public environment, and now are going, I've actually always been curious, like, how can I try out a game? Like, the permissions for people to now be socially acceptable in asking or being curious about games and then diving in and realizing how much fun it can be is so much easier now than it used to be. So it's just going to continue to grow, I think, to a certain degree. And people kind of sharing the love. And D&D, I love myself some D&D. It's where I grew up. It's not the only game out there. And there are so many ways people can still improve upon it. And there are so many great new indie systems and old indie systems that are resurging and coming back to the surface now that show alternatives to the D&D experience. I love me high fantasy, and I love the classicness of it, but it's not for everybody. And there are certain stories that you want to try and tell that don't fit in necessarily best for a D&D world. So I'm also seeing a lot of new industries arise for tabletop indie programs and indie companies that are developing just new ways to involve groups and new rule systems. It's just so cool to see it a thriving industry once more. And where once there was maybe one or two major sources for tabletop games, now there's dozens and dozens and hundreds now popping up all over, and it's working towards being sustainable on that scale the further we go. So that's super exciting to me.
So what has it meant for you, this game, in your life? Not just for, the money and the fame, like personally.
Let me know when the money comes in.
Didn't we all support your Patreon?
Oh, well, the Kickstarter?
Oh, yeah,
yes.
Actually,
yeah.
You don't get that money.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, that money
Everyone
goes...
Everyone go and buy the comic book.
that money goes to the animation. But the gaming for me, in particular, role-playing games, kind of helped me figure out who I was and who I wanted to be. When I discovered it in my freshman year of high school, I was a very quiet artist kid who... loved comics, loved video games, loved anime and cartoons, and had a group of friends, but wasn't sure who I was going to grow into. And role-playing games gave me an opportunity to try out these different personalities, to build characters and archetypes that I thought maybe I wanted to be more like, or knew I didn't want to be, and wanted to experience it so I could even further double down on the knowledge that is not who I want to become. And through that, I found confidence. I found better abilities at speaking publicly and, getting past my insecurities to a certain extent. There's still many that will never go away, but far better than I used to be when I was in school. And I owe a lot of that to growing up and playing D&D. And it gave me my love of theater. I found that there was a spark in me for performance that I never knew I had before. And so I started going into theater and doing stage productions and just wanting to perform and act, which, as a quiet nerd kid, was a huge step. And lo and behold, years later, I found a way to get into voiceover, and it became a career. So it's a really weird path that I didn't expect to take, but it all kind of begins in that crucible of rolling up a character with some dice and saying, all right, who do I want to be at the table?
I think it's such a wonderful transformative culture overall. Mm-hmm. Like the stuff that you can learn about yourself.
Yeah.
Everything you just said, but worse. No, I'm sorry, I just repeated myself there. So this is actually, we have about 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. So time flies, and still I didn't actually prepare enough questions for you. That was like, you're used to talking for 4 hours straight, but I guess like the rest of the team helps.
Hey, that works out well. Yeah, that's the thing too, as a DM. You don't have to prepare the entire session. Just prepare enough questions to mess with your players so they have to talk amongst themselves. And then sit back and go, okay, what do I need to prepare now?
This, coincidentally, also a good tip to get out of an awkward family dinner.
Yeah. For anyone who's ever, and this is a good point, if anybody here has never had an experience GMing or DMing for a game, and you've always been kind of nervous about it, I understand. It seems like a very daunting task. But if you have the opportunity, I recommend you try it at least once. Doesn't mean it'll be your thing, but there's something so special about creating an experience for your friends and gifting it to them, and watching them tear it apart and go in directions you didn't expect and frustrate you in the most beautiful way. But there's nothing like it. I love playing games, and I love the opportunity to play a player character in certain one-shots and other person's campaigns here and there. But nothing beats running a game for me. Being in that GM chair, it is a pure form of gifting to my friends. Every week on Thursday, I get to go, all right, guys, I love you so much. I spent hours this week building this space for you to play, and have fun with it. And it's great, and I love it.
And now that gift is also given to this wonderful community. Yay.
Like we had like a basset hound in the back there. Ooh!
Travis?
Maybe. How did he get here so fast? There it is. That's the one.
So we have 3 more minutes. This is insane.
Okay.
Let's just hang out. How was your day?
Yeah, I was cruising through the answers because I was afraid we weren't going to get to all your questions. I didn't mean to jump to the end. Well.
No, this is great. You answered all my questions without me having to ask them.
Were there any voiceover related stuff you wanted to ask about?
Sorry?
Any voiceover stuff you wanted to ask about?
Oh yeah, let's actually talk about that. You also have a voiceover career.
On occasion.
You play Yusuke in Persona 5, and people know you from Overwatch.
Oh, yes. My boy.
Do you have any tips quickly for people who might want to get into voiceover?
Yeah, all right. Let me give you some quick tips. 1, voiceover is more about the acting than it is the voice. I know people are like, I do good impressions, and I can do some character stuff. And you're like, that's cool. But honestly, most projects that you ever are going to book aren't going to book you so much for your crazy cartoon voices as they are going to be something closer to your natural voice. And it's the performance that layers beneath them that ends up making you stand out amongst the rest of the people you're competing with. It's a very competitive industry. If you want to, come into the ring and do the same job that I'm doing, then you're going to come in and you're going to be up against me. So, I don't mean that in like a come at me bro type of way. And I welcome it. I'm just saying that you need to be prepared. And that comes with a lot of training. That comes with practice. That comes with, going into workshops or finding different directors and performers that can teach you these techniques. Get comfortable behind the mic. Take time behind the mic. Get used to hearing your voice, which is a big step for a lot of people because you have to record yourself saying and reading out loud and then listening back with a constructive ear. Cold reading is huge. Most of your career in voiceover is reading from a script you were just handed immediately and recording based on that. So you have to get used to just taking a page and then reading it best you can, making choices off the cuff in the moment, because that's what a lot of the job is. And theater.
Theater. That's great.
Honestly, like being on stage, most of the skills that I learned doing a lot of theater work transitioned into voiceover far more than any on-camera training did. It's just a great place to kind of hone your craft and get comfortable with performing live in front of strangers, because with voiceover, it's a similar experience, except you walk into a room covered in sound foam, and there's a glass window where there's a director, producer, writer, and a bunch of other people around here, a sound engineer, that many of them you've never met before, sit there and go, okay, your script is there right on the stand. We're on page 1, line 1. Give me an ABC, go. And you just have to perform with like little intro at all. And that comfort to get you there comes from just practicing in front of an audience.
Thank you so much for joining us in Sweden. And I think I speak for all the critters here when I say, please come back. It's been lovely having you. Everyone, Matthew Mercer.
Thank you, guys.